Hi, my name is Shayne Gallagher, and I have worked in wilderness therapy for 30 years. I helped develop or design 4 different wilderness therapy programs, and I spent about 1,400 days in the dirt, in the actual dirt, in the wilderness with adolescents and young adults who struggle with addiction issues, mental health issues, emotional issues, and a lot of trauma issues actually as well. I've spent my career designing ways in which people who are the caregivers can work with young people who need the care in relational ways. So a little bit about the relational model. When you're working with young people, you can either have a behavioral model or a relational model. Well, there's a lot of other models as well. A relational model is one in which we rely on the relationship that we have with the client to help them decide that they might want to change. Behavioral model has a lot of nuances to it, but one of them is to create enough sticks or carrots to kind of guide this being down the road that you want him to go, the way you want him to go. It's a methodology that's been used for decades and decades. It's starting to be outdated, and it's frankly kind of catching up to us, those of us who've been working with a relational model for decades now, 3 decades. So the idea is if you take away field staff are the ones who work out in the wilderness with our clients. If you take away their power to consequence and constantly confront and sort of overwhelm with authority the children in their care, they have to get creative suddenly. And they have to come up with ways that through their relationship with that child in front of them, they can help that child want to change, want to relate to others. And behavior is mostly just the act of how we relate to other people. So relationship is how we help change the way that the child relates to others, and their behavior starts to follow that. So that's part. I'm probably going to be talking a lot more about a relational model as I make more of these. Right now I'm just sort of introducing some of my thoughts and myself in this particular podcast. And today, most specifically, I was asked to talk a little bit about this COVID-19 business and some of the just some of the aspects of that, the conditions that we're under, and what we can do as individuals and families while we're undergoing this really tough time. First question that I was asked is this: what potential issues do you feel single individuals will encounter or develop while isolated or quarantined? So that's kind of interesting. I want to riff on that for a second. What does it mean to be alone? What does it mean to be in relation with other people? Some people believe that we are human beings as isolated units or as isolated entities. There's a phrase, I think, therefore I am, and it doesn't have anything to do with anything else other than just me. Well, there's another thought that says, I relate, therefore I am. So, for example, if you somehow magically were able to take a human being and put them on an island with zero access to any other people, they would grow up, if that were possible, without language, without the ability to form ideas, even in their head, as those ideas might pertain to living in a world with other people. They wouldn't even know how to conduct themselves in a way that shows their humanity, even to themselves. It would be very difficult, obviously, to create that particular scenario. We've had a couple examples. One main example is Helen Keller. Her teacher helped her become introduced to the world, actually, become a human, because while going through that process of understanding what language was, she began to relate to a world in a whole different way. So, or one could say, began to relate to the world at all. So what does it mean to be alone, isolated? And especially during this time, if you're a single individual and you're wanting to stay 6 feet away from everybody and, kind of do your own thing to keep yourself safe and that sort of thing. Well, obviously, there's a lot of strategies for that in terms of what to do. I'm actually not going to belabor that point, because if anybody gets on Google and Googles, what to do during these COVID-19 times or something like that. I'm sure there's a lot of information out there that I don't need to give. But I just would like to shed some light, and I sort of did already, at least part of it, shed some light on the idea that while we're alone, while we're isolated, maybe we have some opportunities to contemplate our relationships. Maybe we have some opportunities to read about, write about how we want to walk in the world with others once we're able to again. And then obviously, of course, we have the social media and telephones and all that sort of thing to be able to communicate with other people. But while not in their actual physical presence, maybe this time of being alone, and all of you introverts out there are probably like this, maybe this time of being alone it could be a reset, actually. As an individual, how do I want to walk in the world after this, after I'm able to walk with others again? So that'd be my answer on that. Well, the next question is, how can we stay engaged during these difficult times to avoid losing track of oneself or one's purpose? Well, that would assume that we are on track with ourselves or our purpose. The way that the question comes is, how do you avoid losing track of oneself? Well, do you have track of yourself? Do I have track of myself? I don't know. What's the definition of being in track of oneself, or sort of on track with your purpose? Well, again, this sounds like a really good time to contemplate what you want your purpose to be. And, one's purpose and one's intention in life in terms of purpose is going to change over time. We are at an era, or the last couple weeks, where a lot of people are losing their jobs. A lot of people, it is serious and difficult out there. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, down at the very bottom is just survival type stuff. And then towards the top is, am I living my purpose, and am I fulfilling my destiny? So at times like these, we're sort of concentrating on the lower ends, or the lower part of the hierarchy of needs. But while we're doing that, I actually like the question, because it's perfectly fine to contemplate what our higher intentions are. And, do we have time? Maybe we have a lot more time than normal to contemplate what we want our purpose to be. Sometimes when you contemplate your purpose and you start to, line it out, maybe the track that you've been on isn't a track you actually want to be on. Maybe you want to start a whole new career. Those sorts of things are going to come back. Society's going to, snap back. But it might not snap back in the exact same way that it was before, once all this COVID-19 stuff clears. And maybe it's going to snap back and we'll find ourselves in a slightly different world. Maybe we have the opportunity to snap back in a different way and, think more about what we want our purpose to be. A lot of people don't sit down and think about what they want their purpose to be. It's been occasional for me in certain times of my life, and other times it's been a little bit more time on it. So I guess the question, how do you lose your purpose? Maybe this would, how do you not lose your purpose? Well, maybe this is a good time to actually contemplate your purpose in the first place. And contemplating largely one's purpose as it pertains to how you want to walk with others in this life. Next question. These are good questions, by the way. With so much time for self-reflection, how do you suggest we manage new feelings of anxiety and depression if we have never experienced such feelings before, or have been able to distract ourselves with keeping busy? Distracting ourselves with keeping busy comes right down into the wheelhouse of wilderness therapy, by the way. Our life is full of distractions, especially in this age of social media and all kinds of media. We're distracted all the time, and we're mostly distracted from ourselves. So the degree to which I can just game or kind of drone out on YouTube or whatever it is that I choose to do might just be the degree to which I don't have to pay attention to myself and what's going on with me. We live in a way that is sort of like being around each other or in access of each other across all of these media channels without really being with each other. But there's also ways to be with each other across all of these media channels as well. So that would be my answer, or my thoughts about how do we how do we not fall into complete depression or anxiety because we used to be accustomed to avoiding going there because we keep ourselves busy and distracted. Well, in wilderness therapy, you cannot be, you don't have access to any of this modern stuff. So it causes a quandary, and it causes a word that a lot of us are afraid of. It causes a word that a lot of parents are afraid of. And some people so detest this word that they will go to all kinds of lengths to avoid it, to stay away from it. What is this incredibly horrible word? The word is boredom. We will do anything we can not to be bored. And what is boredom? Well, boredom is a misunderstanding of the value of silence. Boredom is a misunderstanding of the value of shutting up long enough externally that you can start to hear your own voice. There's a problem, though, with this process of trying to hear your own voice, and it causes a little bit of an illusion, because as we try to hear our own voice, we will hear sort of the compilation of a whole bunch of other voices. Voices of comparing ourselves to others, voices of listening to the criticism maybe we have received from others, voices of the criticism we give to ourselves. There's all of these sort of fake voices, if you will, that are coming from yourself, and when you're not distracted, you kind of get faced with those voices, and then you need to navigate those voices, and it's helpful to have somebody that's willing to help you navigate those. That's where a therapist comes in, or a counselor, or a good friend that seems to have common sense and has helped you before, that sort of thing. But to navigate those voices and to kind of work on them, and then to think and contemplate and journal even more, starts it continues the journey down the road to where now you get past these fake voices that are coming from your own head, because you've made some efforts to kind of work through them. And then suddenly, and sometimes not so suddenly, but it comes as a surprise. You can't necessarily get there on purpose or directly, but as you continue to swim in, live in, be okay with the silence, the boredom, and you are in the process of negotiating those voices, then suddenly your real voice starts popping out. And our real, genuine inner voice has a couple purposes. One of its main purposes is to ask questions. And the answers that we can gain in life are going to be commensurate with the quality of our questions. And at the very least, when we sit silently and with boredom, with aloneness long enough, we can start to ask better questions. And when we start to ask better questions, suddenly, and again, just as unexpectedly, answers come. The quality of genuinely learning means that we find out something or have new information come to us that we didn't expect. If we expected it, then it's not learning, actually. It's just predicting a repetition of something we already knew. So your own real true voice can speak to you. Some people call this our consciousness. Some people call this, the little voice inside. Some people call this our inner wisdom. It's got a lot of names. Sometimes we hear that voice random, even when we are in society and are just distracted by a lot of things. But we can approach it when we are okay. I'm going to be okay with boredom and with silence. Now, to talk a little bit about the anxiety and depression piece, I understand that, actually. I have battled a lot with depression and anxiety myself. I come from a family, growing up, it was quite a struggle and not a very easy way of growing up. I'm probably going to be doing podcast sharing a little bit more about that. But anxiety is a well-known associate of mine, and so is depression. So if you can busy yourself, you can avoid those two little monsters. If you sort of realign your perception of life, you can avoid those two little monsters. In these circumstances, when not only are we experiencing a lot of external reasons to have anxiety and depression, again, maybe this is providing an opportunity. Who can we go to? Before, maybe we just distracted ourselves and busied ourselves to kind of not think about our anxiety or our depression. Now we can keep doing it because gaming is available and all this social media stuff is available. In the wilderness it's not, but it is for all of us. But can we take this time to call upon other people? I relate, therefore I am. Call upon other people that we know to help us through those things. Fortunately, we live at a time where we're not in the pioneer era where we're stuck in a house, and we have no way of actually communicating, and so with other people if they're also sequestered and quarantined, and so we don't have the same sort of ways to reach out as we do now, and so we should just do more of that, reaching out. So there are more questions. This has more to do with family units instead of sort of the individual thing. So here's the question. Family lives have been turned upside down with school closures, working from home, and unemployment. This is resulting in a dramatic increase in time spent together. How can parents and children communicate with one another when they need space or quiet time? Okay. So years ago, 29 years ago, I was in a training, and there were several participants in this training, and one of these participants was a Native American man, and what he did for a living is he raised wolves. And, as young, newly married, and had always thought that would be pretty cool to have a wolf. And so I asked him, well, what's the deal there? How does one purchase a wolf? And I also thought that, full-blood wolves are, not able to be had as pets, because eventually they'll, their wildness will come out and they'll attack people or whatever. And he disabused me of that opinion very quickly. And he said, if you understand wolves and their instincts, especially their main two instincts, then you'll know what to do, and they will actually know what to do. And then he started asking me questions. It was really interesting. So he goes, do you have any kids? I'm like, well, yeah, we've got a little baby. Great. Do you get along with your wife? Well, yeah, I think we get along pretty well. Great. Do you plan on having more kids? Yeah, probably. Well, do you plan on getting along pretty well with them and with your wife for the next decade? I hope so. And then I kind of interrupted him, like, what is up with this line of questioning? Why are you asking me all these questions? And then I'm telling you, it was fantastic. He said, these wolves, two instincts. One is obey the alpha or be it. So instinct number one, if the alpha is in charge, meaning not necessarily that there's an individual wolf who's, kicking everybody's butt and so they're therefore in charge, but more of the sense that things are good, things are calm, things are at peace, so to speak, and in the case of wolves specifically, because there's a clear leader. Well, in human society, the metaphor may not go across exactly that way, but it's a similar idea. The second instinct, be the alpha. So he says to me, these wolves, he says, I'll only sell at least two at a time, not one, because they need to be, in a pack. So he goes, imagine I'm a wolf in the backyard, and I'm noticing discord. There's discord with those two larger bipeds, over there in the house. There's discord between them and this little biped. There's, quarreling with these little bipeds over here. There must not be an alpha. I'm guessing there's not an alpha, because if there were, then this stuff wouldn't be happening. I am supposed to try to be the alpha. And so then you send your 8-year-old out to, feed the wolf dog, and he comes back with part of his pinky missing, and then suddenly the wolf has gone wild, and this is what contributes to these things you hear about. So he said, all that has happened is the wolf's second instinct is engaged. He goes, I get my wolves back all the time, and I have to sort of retrain them in terms of who's the alpha, and which is not them, and he had this methodology of doing that. But the point that I took away from that is children, obviously they're not wolves, but part of this, I think, is true with children as well. If there is discord, it's not that their instinct to become the alpha is engaged. We're different than wolves that way, but the instinct to try to survive within the context of the conflict is what becomes engaged. Sometimes, adults say, well, that kid is just really manipulative. She's just trying to manipulate you. Well, is that true? Would the manipulative child know that they're trying to manipulate? Well, maybe. But can they meta-think about their manipulative strategies? And what do I mean by that? Can they, as an observer, notice and make sense of the fact that they are manipulating? Probably not. They might be good at manipulating, though. Well, this is their instinct come to the fore by trying to figure out how to survive amongst adults who aren't getting along. And so some of them become manipulative. Some of them become have attachment difficulties. Some of them will self-isolate. So, personalities are different, so it gets manifested in different ways. But when we, as a mom and as a dad, or as a partner of any gender, married, not married, all of this matters less than the adults in the home, the grown-ups in the home, kind of guiding the I'm not going to say the conduct of all the members of the family, but guiding the energy of what's going on in the house. So whether we have this COVID-19 thing going on or not, these principles are going to be the same. But they get magnified a little bit more in times like this because we're around all these people more. It is sometimes said that we're the worst with the people that we love. Well, that's just because we haven't been around those strangers that we're not worst with for very long. If we were, we'd probably be bad with them too. So our job then, whether it's this COVID-19 or not, is to work on those part of ourselves that and try to alleviate ourselves of those part of ourselves that are motivated to have conflict. And that's a whole other podcast that I'll address at that time. Suffice it to say, we have an opportunity to be challenged. We have an opportunity to see our family members in a whole new way, not behave towards them in a whole new way, or what sorts of activities can we do. Again, go to the internet and look up a bunch of activities to do. But I can do these activities with my kids while having what I call a heart at war, or I can do these activities with my kids while having what I call a heart at peace. And, a dad with a heart at peace is going to do an activity that, he researched and figured out how to do in a very different way, behaviorally, than a dad with a heart at war. And, same with moms and whoever the adults might be. So, the question, how do we sort of guide and help and have, survive the quiet time, so to speak? A lot of it might be ourselves just realizing the quality of this quiet time and, calming our own heart down as the grown-ups, to help these budding grown-ups. and allow the children that are having access to us all day long to help us grown-ups rediscover our childlikeness as well. So if your kids are toddlers, get toddlerish. If your kids are teenagers, get teenager-ish. If there is time to play online games with your children, do it. There's time to, play with blocks. Do that. Children have a much less difficult time figuring out what to do with themselves and their time than adults do. So watch them. Seek to understand kind of where their brain is going and what they want to do and how they want to relate in this world. They want to relate to you moms and dads, and double dads, double moms, however it's arranged. They want to relate to you. And wow, here we have this really great opportunity. And even in the midst of pretty severe difficulty. So, work on that one. Here is the other question having to do with the family scene. What activities can families do to build a foundation of love, respect, and understanding? Well, that's a pretty short question and has an enormously long answer. And I could just kind of scratch the surface on this one. We are in this COVID-19 thing, and so these sort of issues are coming to the fore. Thank goodness. So I'll just kind of try to touch it on a little bit. Not that I'm like the king of, having a foundation of love, respect, and understanding in my home, but between my wife and I think we did a pretty good job. She did a better job than I did. But in terms of principles, we'll talk about that a little bit. Respect. So let's imagine that I'm the sort of person that believes I deserve respect. Okay? Let's go even further. Let's imagine that I'm the sort of person who believes I deserve respect because of my age as compared to those that I believe I should receive respect from. There's a saying, you should respect your elders, for example. Well, elders really like that one because anybody who might be younger than them needs to respect them, and they just need to do it. And teachers sometimes kind of adopt that one, really quickly. Any snickering, being late, anything is an act of disrespect to the teachers. And therefore, they have every right, justification, and even duty to either kind of blow up or, send them to the principal or, something like that. Well, part of the problem is that when a person feels like they deserve respect and they don't get it, it engages aspects of them that are very uncomfortable to them. If they don't walk around thinking I'm the sort of person who deserves respect, then a lack of respect isn't troubling. It would be more of a situation where it might be useful to that person for me to help them understand principles around respecting others and make their life better. But them disrespecting me doesn't become an internal problem with me. On a whole different podcast, I'll be talking about a thing called button boards. Wait for that one. But to sort of, make this a little bit shorter, what activities can families do to build a foundation of love, respect, and understanding? The activities that families can do to build a foundation of those three things doesn't really have much to do with the activities that families can do. Probably sounds kind of odd. It's more about, though, those members of the family, the grown-ups, the parents of these, most specifically, are going to have to perhaps rethink their conceptualization of respect and understanding and even love. There are so many interpretations of love, And, some parents, if they're not shown love by their children, that's a problem for them. Some parents, if they're not shown understanding by their children, don't you know your father is stressed out? He's had a long day. That's a parent telling a 4-year-old that the 4-year-old needs to understand them. Can you imagine? I'm like a 45-year-old man. I come home, I'm all tired and stressed out, and the kids are running around. And don't you get it? I've had a hard day. No, they don't get it. In fact, they don't even understand that, even though the words coming out of your mouth, they understand what those words are and that they are coming in a string, but they don't understand what that means. The adult is actually trying to extract understanding out of the 4-year-old, 6-year-old, 8-year-old, 14-year-old. And every now and then, because of some positive thing that might be going on inside of that child, they might have an epiphany. Wow, I'm making my parents' life harder. I really need to understand them. It'd be cool if I understand them. The children I work with, I often bring this up to them. One of our goals and hopes is that they just see their parents as people. How would it be if children just saw their parents as people? Well, that's a whole other subject as well. But it doesn't start with the adult expecting their child to be understanding of them. So this is a subject perhaps more of letting go. How can we let go of our need for love and respect and understanding, and just be a giver of those things? And if I'm focusing on just being a giver of those things, then the question, what activities can a family do, again, can be Googled. There's tens of thousands of activities. Now, obviously, it would be nice if it would be most effective if these activities had to do with interaction and, learning about principles of love and respect and understanding. But as a set of parents, or as the grown-ups, have we let go enough so that the activities we do with our children will turn out to be what they really could be without ourselves in the way? So, the last question, can you explain Arbinger's influence pyramid, and how would you implement this tool? So the person who asked me this question knows that I have some familiarity with Arbinger. So Arbinger is a consulting company that helps individuals, families, organizations, and big business with their interrelationships with each other, so that they can spend more time making the product or otherwise becoming more efficient and capable as an entity, whether it be a business or a family. That's sort of a summarization of it. Arbinger is awesome. If you don't, if you're watching this, listening to this, and you don't know what Arbinger is, go to arbinger.com. It's like Harbinger, like a hard-hearted harbinger of haggis, if you've seen that movie, but it is without the H, so it's just Arbinger. So arbinger.com. They have publications and books that are just mind-rocking and awesome. And there is a little tool that they talk about, and it's the influence pyramid. Sometimes it's called the parenting pyramid. Well, there is much to say on it, so this is it doesn't do it service to do it in such a summarized manner. But basically it says this: if I am hoping to help things go right in terms of my influencing my child or my student or my client to do better behaviorally, then I follow the principles of this pyramid, at the base of which is looking at my own way of being. I've talked about that a little bit in terms of my buttons and my button board and examining my own life. So at the base of the pyramid is my way of being. Do I have a heart at peace or a heart at war? Am I in the box or out of the box? Go to arbinger.com. You'll know what I'm talking about with using those terms. And then above that is, how is my relationship with those who I am seeking to have influence with? And right along with that is the principle of, what is my relationship with those who are helping me, or I'm helping them, or we're lateral in helping the people that we're seeking to influence. It goes back to the wolf analogy. If I'm trying to work with these kiddos, and whether it be students in a program or students in school, or I'm a coach and people on my team, or children in my home, they need to have a sense that I'm also out of the box with fellow caregivers. So then above that is listening and learning. Have I tried to capture the essence of what's going on with those that I hope to influence? And above that is education and teaching. Have I shared enough? Have I showed enough? Have I explained things well enough? Have I introduced enough principles? And then above that is correct. So if things are going, if we're kind of having a little bit of a problem in terms of the behavior of a person I have influence over, well, then our job is to go down on the pyramid. So if one of my kids isn't obeying, well, then just below correct is teach and communicate. Did I explain things well enough? Did I explain my expectations well enough? And if that doesn't seem to be working, then I go down from there. Listen and learn. Have I inquired as to what's going on with this child? Have I listened and learned in terms of observation? Have I observed enough? My little 4-year-old is freaking out because they've been in the house all day long. And so have I thought through that? And then below that, what's my relationship with this child? What's my relationship with fellow caregivers? And then below that, way of being. So on the influence pyramid, you can also Google that. Google images, and you'll see several versions of the Arbinger influence pyramid. And just remember, when I'm trying to help things, when they don't seem to be working on one level, I go down. If I want to help things go right sort of from the get-go, I start at the bottom and go up. All right, so here's the last question for this initiate, or here's a question for this initial podcast of mine. The person asking the question says this: you recently wrote a book centered around parent-child relationships and interactions. Can you tell us more about this book? Well, as a matter of fact, I have. It is right here. That's upside down. So, Way with Children. If you are not familiar with it, then go buy it, for heaven's sake. So you can go to Amazon. That's the best and easiest way to get a hold of it. So you can Google my name, or you can Google that title, The Way with Children, Ancient Wisdom for Leading Modern Young People. So it is a transduction or a version of the Tao Te Ching. If you're familiar with the Tao Te Ching, it is a version of it that's made specifically for people who work with children, parents, teachers, coaches, people like me who work in programs wherein they have young people as clients. If you're not familiar with the Tao Te Ching, Google that and read the Tao Te Ching, or read parts of it. It would take another podcast will be coming wherein I will describe all of that, and Lao Tzu and some of the history and legend around how the Tao Te Ching came to be. But suffice it to say, this is a transduction made specifically for parents, teachers, like I mentioned. It has 81 sections that describe in a wisdom literature type way principles around how to be with those that you have care for. And I hope you enjoy it. It's meant to be read more than once and kind of let the principles soak in, so to speak. So there you go. Hey, everybody out there, if you have liked any or all of this podcast, it's the first one. There's going to be more coming. I'm sort of being forced by people who know me to do this. So, and I'm happy to do it. I just kind of had to get over a little bit of nervousness. So here's the initial one. More is going to be coming. Subscribe to the channel that is somewhere on there that, is shown. You can be able to click on it or whatever, and listen to my rants. And hopefully they will be useful to you as parents or practitioners or as therapists or as coaches or as teachers as we go along. Thanks.